Hello there and welcome to the Irish Film London podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome aboard, and if you're a regular, it's lovely to have you back. Here on the Irish Film London podcast, we bring you all the latest and greatest talent from Irish film, TV and animation, with recordings of live Q&As and interviews from our festivals and award ceremonies, as well as a host of brand new interviews, one of which I'm delighted to bring you today. Our podcast today is a bit different in a few ways, one of which it's conducted by our new head of Irish Film London, Gerry Maguire, and it's also an interview about a film that hasn't even been made yet, The Last Moon. Today we're meeting Sean McConville and Stéphanie Joalland from Frenzy Films. Irish Film London are newly proud partners with Stowe Story Labs, and Sean is the recipient of the 2021 Irish Film London Fellowship. This is awarded to a top emerging UK-based screenwriter or filmmaker who is Irish, of Irish descent, or is a member of the Irish diaspora. All fellowships cover the fee to attend the Stowe Narrative Lab, as well as consultations, storyboard quick software, free copy of Final Draft, and a year ISA Connect membership. If you're an independent filmmaker, you'll know how tough it is to make films, so all the help and support is so important and hugely welcomed. This podcast will give you an insight into what it's like pre-production, what it's like to get funding, how the filmmakers are finding the development stages, and what aspirations they have for it in the future. Just before I hand you over to Gerry, we'd like to thank Culture Ireland and the Irish Emigrant Support Programme for their ongoing support for our work, including this podcast series. So, enjoy the chats with Sean and Stéphanie about the predicted werewolf film of the decade.
So, I'm joined today by Sean McConville and Stéphanie Joalland, who are from Frenzy Films, and their project, The Last Moon, has just been announced as the Stowe Story Labs recipient of the IFL Stowe Story Labs Fellowship. It's our inaugural fellowship. It's the first time that we've done something like this with Stowe Story Labs, and it's the first time I think IFL has done anything like this. But Sean and Stéphanie have agreed to talk to us today about what that means for them, and about the fellowship itself, and about their background as filmmakers, and probably a lot of other things as well. So Sean, Stéphanie, how you doing?
Good. Well, thanks. And thanks for having us.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for joining us. So where are you both today?
We're both in St. Malo, Brittany. I've been in France since last July. I came out to help Stéphanie fix up her apartment and sell it and so on, and that was a kind of protracted sale. And we were there longer than expected. And then things got worse with the COVID in the UK, so we ended up staying longer. And then after Christmas, Stéphanie was in another part of Brittany with her parents, but I went out to St. Malo, and I've been here ever since. So St. Malo.
Yeah, we got basically stuck because we can't travel back to the UK, so until May. So here we are. But it's a lovely part of France, and obviously it's very, culturally very close to Ireland. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, look, the sun's shining in London today. I hope you've got the sun shining where you are today, in St. Malo as well.
Oh yeah, we do.
But, it is, yeah.
Sean, your background as a filmmaker takes you via Ireland and the UK to where you are. I mean, where are you normally based? You're not normally based in St. Malo, are you?
No, London, based in London. For a number of years, which I can talk about, my sort of journey to from first getting into films and to where I am now. But I was in Los Angeles because I went to UCLA to study screenwriting a number of years ago, and I ended up, when I graduated, living there for like 8 or 9 years, and pushed the visa to the maximum, all sorts of trips. But ultimately, I had to leave LA because of visa reasons and moved back to London. So based in London now.
Cool. Where did you start off your life? Were you born and raised in London?
No, I'm from Watford. My parents are both Irish. My father was from Dromore, County Down, and my mother was from Ballinarn, County Mayo, and they moved to London when they were in the late teens or early 20s, and they still had their Irish accents throughout life. So, you know, the Irish side of things is very close to me in that respect. But Watford was where I was born and brought up. And it's kind of interesting because if I stood on the roof of the house where I was not born, but brought up, I'd be less than a mile away is Warner Brothers Film Studios, which I believe is the biggest film studio in the world now.
Wow.
And, you know, where they made all the Harry Potter films and Wonder Woman and Batman and Tom Cruise movies. But the first movie that was made there was GoldenEye, which I got to work on. So that was my sort of break into film. As a crew person, I was doing special effects, physical effects. But the kind of irony is, as soon as I got into it, you know, I went on this journey myself. I did a Master of Arts in screenwriting in London. Well, basically, I worked on about 15 movies, most of them bigger studio movies, mostly in the prop making, model making, and special effects side of things. But I started reading the screenplays and fell in love with the writing side of things. I thought that looks really easy. So I took a year off, and during that year, I was told about this Master of Arts in Screenwriting at the London College of Communications, and I applied to that and got accepted. So that was for 2 years. So that sabbatical turned into 3 years, really. And then before I graduated from that MA, I applied to go to UCLA to study screenwriting, and I got accepted. So I moved to LA to do that. And as I said, I ended up living there about 8 years. But the funny thing is that this film studio that's like literally right at my doorstep of the house I was brought up in, you know, as that became a really huge film studio where some of the biggest movies in the world are made, was when I kind of left town and moved away and went off on this other journey. And you know, it's a kind of strange thing, but you know, one of my big dreams is to actually make a movie there as a director at Warner Brothers Studios, because it's on my doorstep. So that's the kind of big dream I have. That would almost be like a full circle journey.
Yeah, bring it all back to where it first began.
Yeah.
That's nice. So you spent quite a long time in LA then, like, because your UCLA course would, like, you were there 7, 8, 9 years in LA. Your UCLA course must have just been the start of that journey. Did you find when you were working over there that it was much different to how we do things in the UK and in Ireland?
I did, yeah, very different. You know, there's more of a can-do, positive mentality. I think it's much more entrepreneurial. How they make films, there's not really such a thing as soft money or government funding or grants. In an indirect way, there is now, because each state in the US, or 40 of the 50 states, you know, encourage filmmakers to go to their state to make movies, and they give you like anything from 20 to 40% tax credits. You know, so that's the same as getting, you know, 35% of the you know, Screen Island or the BFI or something, but there's no qualification other than shooting in their state. So there's no creative input, there's no, you know, other stipulations that you get with government money and soft money. So basically most films are made with private equity in an entrepreneurial way, and that is a big difference. And I like that way of making films. The other big difference is, you know, I think their love of genre films is you know, they sell more tickets basically, and because it is a business, but first and foremost, they're more drawn to genre films, which is what we do. So it was more attractive in that respect. But the other big difference, I think, is a generalization, but certainly in LA, the level of craft and the level of drive and ambition of everyone that's there, and the understanding that it is a business as much as it is, you know, show business or you know, creative, is it was another big difference between, you know, Europe and the US. So yeah, I learned a lot from that side of things, and that they would be the main differences to me. I don't know what Stephanie found. She lived there for a while as well. It's where we met, actually.
Yeah, the main difference as well is that the writers directors tend to be producers as well in LA, in the US, as opposed to the rest of Europe. I would say that in the UK it's kind of in between. It's really it's halfway between an American model and a European model, because you have self-funding, but also private equity. But I would say that that's in the rest of Europe, I find that people tend to avoid hyphenates, so they tend to be either writers, directors, or producers, just because it's so complicated and convoluted to obtain self-funding in Europe, in the EU. So I guess that could explain why it's a full-time job, whereas you have no choice in US or usually Britain. You have to be a producer as well if you want to make a living and make movies.
Yeah, I mean, something I really miss from being there is that, everyone there, I mean, some people would get fed up of it, and you definitely have to leave LA every month to go somewhere where you're not sitting next to a screenwriter in the coffee shop, or an actor or a producer or a director. And so, it's really full on. But the positive side of that is kind of everyone that's there kind of gave up their day job, their state or their country to be there to pursue a dream, of being the next Brad Pitt or being the next Tarantino. And of course, most of them never get to that level, 99.9%. And, you're lucky if you get to direct a movie or TV series or acting one or whatever it may be. But that kind of drive and ambition and shared pursuing of the dream with all those people there was really attractive to me. And I missed that because it was like a positive energy, and you fed off that. And every now and then you'd hear of someone that just got sold a pilot or sold a spec screenplay or just got cast. They were working for 10 years in a coffee shop and they suddenly got cast on some huge movie. Yeah. And it really kept you kind of fueled, and it was always kind of positive versus negative.
Also, what is actually interesting is having just done the European Genre Forum is just to be reminded of the fact that in the EU, again, I'm saying the EU just because I find that Britain is a bit different in terms of self-funding. There's less self-funding. People writers get paid to develop a treatment or a second draft of a screenplay, whereas in America, in the US, you just don't get that type of funding. So you have to, you have to write regardless of being paid for the writing or not, which is vastly different. Whereas in Europe, a lot of writers I know tend to wait for the next round of funding to do a draft, which you couldn't even, spent a lot of time in the US, studying in the US, wouldn't even cross your mind. You have to, to write X amount of screenplays per year when you study there, like 3 or 4. So you get used to it, and you're not going to have to. Of course, that would be lovely to get funding for it. Don't get me wrong, to get paid to write, which is but that's the main. I think it's a huge difference, because you just have to somehow sustain yourself while you do it. Whereas I found that in a lot of countries in Europe, well, there's thanks to the soft funding, it's not a choice a lot of people have to make.
I mean, I suppose like the argument between the Hollywood model and the European model, often the conversation often comes back to like commercial production versus what we might call cultural production, and like the value that the European system seems to have for, or the love that the European system seems to have for film as a cultural commodity, as a means of cultural production, and the fact that you can have, like, there is a thriving art house scene in across Europe, but like the art house scene is, by its own definition, it's not commercial, it's not Hollywood film. But like, because you're both genre filmmakers, so where do you sit within that conversation?
I think that's but just the mere fact that we both studied at UCLA is actually answers your question. So I personally knew very early on that I didn't want to to stay in France to make movies in France, although there's a lot of money for films. But I was drawn to American films, indie and Hollywood movies. In the US, I was drawn to genre films, science fiction, to horror, and I knew that it's not something that could be done easily in France. So I think that I'm big on. I didn't grew up watching art house movies. I grew up watching mainstream movies. So I guess that's why I'm way more into the commercial. The commercial fare. But that being said, I think Sean and I bring a European voice as well, because we bring some our movies are still try to cross the bridge between big Hollywood entertaining movies and deeper movies about human condition. Although obviously Hollywood can also make great deep movies. But yeah, Sean, would you like to?
Yeah, as you said, really, I think, combining kind of the European movies that are mostly character-driven with American-driven, plot-driven type movies, that's kind of our model in a way. And, some films that are a good reference film for me is always The Sixth Sense, which I think is, maybe it's because it's an Indian director or American Indian director, there's another flavor to the Hollywood aspect of it. But so you've got your Hollywood genre and plot-driven storytelling, and you've got European character-driven art house-oriented type movies, and I think there's room to marry both of those together. And I would say that's what we're trying to do. I think the marriage of both, and there are some great movies out that are good examples, obviously. But America does have an art house system as well, for want of a better word. But it's New York, basically. Hollywood is very studio-driven, very genre-driven, very commercial movie making. But there's plenty of art house and character-driven type movie making in the US. It's mostly in New York, and they don't travel as well as the Hollywood studio movies, just from a marketing budget, but also from they're more unique to storytelling to America.
They are. Well, I suppose they'd refer to that as their indie film scene more than
exactly.
And in a lot of ways, what we have in Europe and definitely in the UK and Ireland, like our indie film scene is. Well, I suppose it's the same in a lot of ways. Like a lot of what we call indie or independent film here is not commercial. What you might regard, like if I think of an indie American or an independent American film, I might think of something that's made in a state where there's not much production happening, or shot in a state where there's not much production happening, and with like one celebrity cameo that carries it through or something like that, Whereas I think over here, when we think about independent film, we're thinking about stuff that's outside of the big studio systems, but it can still be like a really successful commercial venture, right?
And if you do, we obviously do have filmmakers that make very commercial films. I don't know if the problem is the right word, but what will naturally happen is if you're the type of filmmaker that makes genre films or entertaining commercial films, there's a limit to the budget range you can have in the UK anyway. But regardless of that, you get lured to Hollywood, whether it's Gareth Edwards or Chris Nolan and several other filmmakers. If they're making those types of films, they're going to get taken to Hollywood, where they can make a 20, 30, 40, 50 or $100 million movie. Which, I don't know what the biggest budget British film is, but it's only every 5 years that we probably make a movie that's £20 million or something.
They're
very few and far between. That it's that catch-22 scenario of whatever kind of commercial or entertainment-oriented type of filmmakers we have in the UK and Ireland, the same in Ireland. They're ultimately, and France, they're ultimately going to get lured to Hollywood, where
what was interesting
have unlimited budgets.
Yeah, because it's so hard to. What's interesting is actually compared to the US, European filmmakers do get quite actually a nice chunk of money for their small indies, right? They can get 2-3 million euros, which is quite big by American standards when it's actually private equity and a small indie. But however, for genre films, usually you know it's much harder to get that kind of money in Europe. So hence, you know, which is why we're all tempted to make movies outside on the other side of the pond, I guess. But what's interesting about Ireland, though, is what we notice at the co-production markets is that really there are two countries that are really big on genre films. It's Belgium and Ireland, because more and more there are a lot of great Irish movies being made in the genre and Irish filmmakers emerging, and so I think that's quite exciting. They are way more open. You know, Screen Ireland they seem to be way more open to genre films. So it's a very good, well, it's very promising. So like you have movies like the Hallow, that was great, or the Canal. Recently there was Sea Fever. That's great because they're all ambitious
the Lodge,
films. Yeah, absolutely. So it's just
the biggest problem in UK really is it's incredibly difficult to get private equity to make a movie. Even a small amount, you know, 100,000, 200,000. It's such a lot of money to raise. But the challenge is there is a snobbishness towards genre films in the UK, I believe. And what that equates to is that you don't get government funding, soft money, whatever you want to call it. And so, you know, it's a knock-on effect of, you know, those movies end up having to be made for 200,000, let's say under $1 million for sure. And there's only so much quality work you can do within that budget range. And then it's a kind of perpetuation of, well, genre films are schlocky or B movies or you know, splatterfests or whatever it may be. There's not the room to make real quality genre films, elevated genre films. That's what Steph and I want to do, you know, without getting proper budgets, enough money, to have enough time and the right crew and the right marketing and all the things it takes to make a film successful. It's not just the film itself, but the support across the board, and the prestige or credibility of having a BFI support it, or the prestigious sales agents, protagonist, and so on. So that's our challenge, because, you know, it's difficult to get private equity, even small amounts, as I said, and it's even more difficult, I would say, to get soft money, BFI funding for genre films, unless you're already, you know, an established filmmaker, or you've proven yourself in some other way first.
Well, I want to push you a wee bit further on that, because I think we're touching on something that's really interesting there in terms of the relationship between the funding landscape in the UK and what's possible in Ireland. And I think you're right that there's a lot of, like we know at Irish Film London, there's a lot of really, really exciting content that's coming out all the time from Ireland, from big and small production companies, and really, really exciting filmmakers that are bringing their work to Ireland to get financed. But do you guys think that is that because, you know, like the funding landscape is a little bit more generous in Ireland in terms of tax breaks? Do you think the reason for it is because it's easier to get films funded with an Irish co-pro, or do you think that is there something else that's going on that's drawing people into Ireland? Like, what's the appeal of working with an Irish producer or working with an Irish co-pro to get it made?
I think that there is definitely a huge appeal, at least for genre films, because again, it seems like it's a bit slightly easier to access self-funding and development funding in Ireland. So I think that's very compelling for producers. Also, your tax credits are more generous than in UK. It's like 37% with the extra 5% that you guys get if you shoot out of Dublin, and so it's as opposed to 20%. So I guess it's more, yeah, the tax incentives are more generous, which which helps. So what else would you?
Well, it's that combination of the Screen Ireland having a different attitude, I believe, towards genre filmmakers than in the UK. The extra tax credit percentage-wise, really fantastic crew. I mean, we made a film in Templemore, Tipperary, Stephanie's debut feature film as a writer-director, and I produced it, and that was very, very low budget, but we had a lot of support from the community. It felt like the whole community came out and supported us in this film, and that was really refreshing to us. And the crew, I'd say 60 or 70% of the crew were Irish and someone from the UK. It was a small crew, but the attitude and enthusiasm from the Irish people in the community, but the Irish crew as well, was really refreshing to us. And yeah, so it's a combination of things. And then the locations, depending on the type of film you're making, it's kind of universal in a way. It could be Yorkshire could be Ireland, Cornwall, all these, they're cut from the same piece of rock, really. So, and then just personally speaking, I have a big association with Ireland, everything about Ireland, the culture, music, sport, and so on, the films, literature, given my parents were both Irish. So it feels, on a personal note, just making a film in Ireland is very special for me. And partly I feel not rejected by the UK film industry in any way, but I just feel it's extremely difficult. And the way things are changing, it's going to be even more difficult, and perhaps rightly so. But I won't get into the sort of politics of it. But there's changes that are necessary and right and need to happen and have happened belatedly. But it also is going to kind of, in a way, make things more difficult as well. I feel Ireland would be a better fit for me in some ways, and it might be just my kind of association with Ireland and what it means to me growing up and so on, and living there over certain periods of my life in Dromore, County Down, with my father, and on the West Coast with my mother's family, and living in Dublin for a couple of years. So just, I guess it's a sort of personal thing that it would mean a lot to me if I was making a movie as a director in Ireland. I think my parents would be very proud, and so it's a personal thing more than anything.
Yeah, and I guess it's in Ireland is not as class oriented as it can be in UK. Again, they are trying to change the situation, but you have a feeling that still the UK is very class oriented, and especially in the film industry. And whereas there's, again, it's just Ireland feels way more open, a bit like America in a way. You just, I think, as if you want to, there's a feeling that it's likely more possible. So we just feel more optimistic either in Ireland or America.
It's simply that making a movie in Ireland for me would be more meaningful than making one in England, really.
Cool. Yeah. Well, look, what I want to do, because we're here to talk about The Last Moon, which is the script that won you guys the fellowship to attend Stowe Story Labs. And I mean, I suppose as a bit of a background on this process of selecting a fellow, so to speak, Stowe Story Labs got in touch with Irish Film London a few months ago, and they're an organisation that had been on our radar. We're aware of what they do over in Vermont, and we're aware of their UK connections to great producers and great people like David Pope, who's one of the founding organisers of it. And we agreed with them that we would put together a support package and become a kind of a partner with them and that we would provide a fellowship so that one filmmaker, and turned out to be Sean and Stephanie, or well, Sean, you're the recipient of the fellowship for your work, but Stephanie, you're allowed in. But that we would fund the fee to attend, the attendance fee for the Stowe Story Lab that takes place in June this year. So we went through this process of everyone submitted their scripts to Stowe, and we picked out all the ones with the Irish connections. We had some finalists, and The Last Moon was the finalist script that stood out and that got you guys this fellowship. So I want to talk about The Last Moon, where it came from and what it means to you guys, and what it is that you want to do with this, because it's in some ways it's the content of this story is familiar, but you're doing something a bit different with it, aren't you?
Yeah, well, firstly, I'm really honoured and grateful to be awarded the fellowship, and as I say, it has a special meaning being associated with Ireland, the Irish Film London. So really, really thank you for that. And it's reassurance for the script. You know, this is a kind of rejection industry in a way. So you win anything, it's really special and important. And again, because it's the Irish Association, even more special in my case. So really a big thank you for that. And I'm glad the project was selected. And Stephanie, yeah, well, she's producing the film, and I think she's an honorary Celt anyway, coming from Britain.
Honorary.
And she after all did already write and direct a film in Ireland. So that's she's definitely allowed in.
Yeah, she's on the white list. You're all right.
But yeah, with The Last Moon, you know, in a nutshell, we're trying to make an elevated genre film, and we've worked really hard on that. So I think the script is in a good place, but we're both very big on story development, the importance of story development. And so being a part of the Stowe Labs, Stowe Narrative Lab, which I know is a really prestigious lab to be a part of. So again, you know, both Stowe Labs and the Irish Film London, I'm really excited and grateful to be a part of that. And it's a great opportunity to really challenge and push the script that a bit more.
Make it the best it can be.
Yeah, exactly, because you know, it doesn't matter. It does matter who the actors are and who the crew are, but nothing, in my opinion, matters as much as the script or the story. And so if we, you know, any opportunity to continue developing that and challenging it and get it ready to be made into a movie, which I think, you know, we're certainly more than 3/4 of the way there in terms of where the script's at, is a great opportunity, because, you know, we do aspire to make you know, some of these films as references that we're aspiring to make, like The Babadook, It Follows, you know, Let the Right One In, Blue Ruin. You know, there's a whole slew in recent years of elevated genre films.
I was just going to say, those are all really good, like, elevated genre comparables.
Yeah. And Ex Machina is another one. Moon. Stephanie's more on the sort of sci-fi side of things, but more supernatural, psychological horror thriller. But you know, the interesting thing about these films is that, you know, the critics love them. You know, they were well regarded by the critics. They played at major festivals and won awards, Cannes, TIFF, Sundance. For the directors, they were financially successful at the box office. And the other, because I've kind of really studied and analysed them, the other thing they have in common, most of them, is that they have unknown actors in, which really tells you don't need to have named actors, which is really difficult, again, in the genre field and when we're talking about making low budget films, to get named cast. But if the script's great, if the talent behind the camera's great DP, you know, and so on, you know, even provided the actors are absolutely brilliant and right for the part, you know, regardless of their level of fame, that film has an opportunity to really break out and do really well with the critics and financially. And that's really our aim with The Last Moon.
Yeah, and what I love about The Last Moon is it's called The Last Moon, so obviously there might be a creature in the movie, but really at the core, it's about two brothers, it's about two siblings, it's about depression and mental illness, and there are not so many movies about two brothers, and it hits the core because it's not on 90% of it is a psychological drama, and plus obviously there is a twist and, you know, and a surprising ending, and the movie fulfills the promise of the title, The Last Moon. But what I love about it is really the very powerful and very well written story involving the two brothers. So, and Sean has a brother, and I can tell that it was written by, you know, a guy who, you know, has a strong bond with his brother. So I can just, which why, you know, so it feels true, and people pick up on that, even if you don't like, and a lot of people don't like werewolves or creatures or monsters, you know, of all sorts, but they love The Last Moon for this very reason, because it feels so real.
Yeah. So it's a werewolf film. We can.
Well, that's something I really
we can say that.
I really struggled with, to be honest, and I'll explain why. But first, Stephanie made it sound like a Bergman movie, which is not. But you know, I sort of come at it as what would a werewolf film be like if it was made by Hitchcock or Polanski? You know, that's kind of what I thought was a good sort of way of looking at it when I was developing it. And I figured, you know, it'd be about suspense and tension and atmosphere versus, you know, blood and gore, and it'd be very contained, set over a short time frame. Yeah. But I really struggled with the fact that it was a werewolf originally, because after many years of writing lots of scripts in various genres, and I got to this place where all of this time, and I'm writing a fucking werewolf film, and I want it to be Neil Jordan or Anthony Minghella. You know, these are my sort of directing heroes, and I'm like, oh God, I'm writing a werewolf film. But you know, kind of something happened when I made it about the two brothers, as Stephanie mentioned. It became richer.
That's when Bergman comes into play. Yeah.
more personal to me. But then the big thing, the turning point for me, when I like embraced this script more and really knuckled down to work hard on it, was I remembered an exercise. When I went to UCLA, we had a professor who made us do this exercise, which was write a list, really think about this, and write a list of 6 to 10 films that really affected you profoundly when you were a kid or a young adult, or you know, your favorite movies that you keep watching every time they're on TV. You know, really think about it, write down 6 to 10, and then analyze them and try and find a pattern within those movies. And I tell this to everyone, writers to do this, students and so on, because I think it was a brilliant exercise. And what you'll start to see, there's some pattern to those movies, the movies that really affect you emotionally. And it might be fish out of water stories, they might be tragedies, they might all be about, you know, escape, you know, whatever they're about. There's something that each film represents that. And the films I wrote down were like Hitchcock's Rebecca, James Wells' Frankenstein, Anthony Mingella's The English Patient, The Crow, Bram Stoker's Dracula. And when I analyzed them, there were 4 aspects to these films. And that was, they were all romantic. They had romance, tragedy, gothic, and supernatural. All of those films I mentioned are all supernatural, gothic, romance, and tragedy. Yeah. And when after a few drafts of The Last Moon, I kind of read it, and I'd been thinking about that exercise at UCLA, and I suddenly realized that The Last Moon has romance, tragedy, gothic, and the supernatural. And it's like, and that was what I needed to feel like a filmmaker, and that it could be a film with some sort of substance and depth, and what I originally aspired to do when I started out on this journey. And but it was it was, because generally if you say you're making a movie about a werewolf or a zombie or vampires, they can have a B-movie connotation or cheap horror, and and that's not what I wanted to do. And so for a while I sort of struggled with that with this particular project. And as I said, when I realized that, so maybe I won't be Neil Jordan or Minghella, but maybe Guillermo del Toro. I'd say it's more in that kind of field now, where yes, he makes supernatural movies, he makes movies about creatures, but they're very, he's a brilliant filmmaker. So within that genre, what we're doing now with The Last Moon, there is that possibility to make something that transcends, because there aren't many great werewolf movies over 100 years of cinema. There's only a handful, really. The American Werewolf in London, The Wolfman, The Howling, Wolfen, and because most of them are badly directed, they're poor scripts, they're poor, not great actors in them, terrible special effects.
Yeah.
But if you care about the script and who the cast are and the cinematography and all those elements, there is the opportunity to do something really, really good, and that's our plan.
Yeah, the plan is to make the werewolf movie of the decade. And there's one
werewolf movie of the decade. Yes.
Well, I don't know. Yes. I guess my point is the bar's pretty low for
right. Yeah.
So there is that opportunity to make a movie that, in that particular genre or niche of werewolf movies, there's the opportunity to make a film that will very quickly, because there are a lot of fanboys and girls, probably for horror, but even more specifically for werewolf stories, and there just aren't that many made. Compared to zombies and it's mostly because the transformation and the creature effects are not something you can do at low budget.
Which is why we don't want to rush off and make the film, because it could be undermined by a bad werewolf, bad perspective, bad visual effects or special effects. That'd be a shame, because it deserves the time and care that the story is calling for. So and I think that's the screenplays are.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you about that, because like the process of development that you've been on, like, must be such an interesting one for this feature as well. Because I know, like, going to Stowe in June, the narrative lab's happening in June. It won't be your first kind of like industry event to bring the project to. I spoke to you guys both around the Jets lab that happened in February this year, I think. And you've been to the European Genre Forum with the project in the meantime. Like, what's it like developing a film that's, it's essentially it's a creature feature, but it's an elevated genre, and it's like it's a lot of things at the same time. Do you think that the process for going through those development sessions is different than it would normally be?
Well, Jets was with Stephanie's project, actually, ICE, not The Last Moon, but the European Genre Forum was The Last Moon, and that's the first lab we've been at with The Last Moon. And the European Genre Forum takes place in 3 different countries. The first one which we just did was in Amsterdam, and that was a director's lab. And then in Zagreb, Croatia, in July, it's the producing side of things. And then in Tallinn, Estonia, right. I think in November, it's about post-production and marketing. But it was really wonderful, because you do end up talking much deeper about your project and why you want to make it and what it means to you. And for me, that was really great and important to be able to express that, and to other filmmakers as well. The way the European Genre Forum is, it's not so much about pitching to industry people, which you have to kind of be, you're pitching everything in a sort of, you're making a presentation to try and get support. But with the way the Directors Lab was set up, it's almost like therapy sessions where you get to talk about what you're worried about, what your fears are with the project, what you're struggling with. Now, you wouldn't do that. Well, you wouldn't go and meet someone from, Lionsgate and say, I'm really struggling with this, or I'm worried about this.
Yeah.
But it's really important for filmmakers to do that, whether it's about the script or they're directing it. And so for me, it was really, really wonderful to be a part of that on The Last Moon, and I hope to continue that in Zagreb and Tallinn. Last year, we were on 4 co-production markets with Stephanie's next film as a director, Ice, and Frontieres, which was in Montreal. That was really good. We did a Biffan in South Korea, and we did the Film Market Hub in London, and Sophia, I forget what the Sophia Labs
Sophia Meetings, yeah.
Sophia Meetings in Bulgaria.
Yeah.
And they were more about pitching, meeting, and they're all online, of course, because of COVID. Normally you would travel to those labs, which is obviously a lot more fun. But that was more about putting your best face on, so to speak. You did have the opportunity to pitch to executives, sales agents, and so on. And that's really important too. And from that, we got a sales agent, a really good sales agent in New York, Visit Films for Ice. And Stephanie also got repped by Zero Gravity Management in the US, from, directly or indirectly from those labs. It came from that. So for all the filmmakers listening, especially genre, a lot of them tend to be genre labs as well, I think. It's really important to be a part of that and really helpful to the project.
Yeah, and in terms of developing, going back to The Last Moon, so it has been a fairly long journey in terms of developing the screenplay. So what we usually do is we write a draft. So Sean write a draft and we send it out for coverage from industry readers. We use Coverfly, and then the coverage was very, very positive, very good actually. So we knew we had something special, and then we have been developing quite a few versions of the screenplay. The good news is at the European Genre Forum, we had a conversation as well with the script doctor, and they knew it was already a fairly advanced draft, so which was reassuring, because if you tell you actually I can send it a first or second draft, it was like you would crumble. But no, that was all good. So we're really pleased that it actually shows that we've put, especially Sean has put a lot of time and energy into his screenplay.
But also these not all of the labs, because they're not all genre, but the ones we're obviously entering are genre-oriented, European Genre Forum and Frontiers especially. But the other great thing about those labs is you're with your tribe. They're all genre fans. They all love genre films. They're very knowledgeable about genre films and supportive of genre films. And again, that to me is missing from the UK industry. And you sometimes feel a bit lonely in that respect, because you're not trying to make Fish Tank or some of these films that are going to play at BFI and going to get the support of government funding, as they should. They're important stories that need to be told, but the genre filmmakers is like a separate club.
Yeah.
And when you are a part of these labs, you're with your tribe, and it's really important for filmmakers to be in their own club as well.
It's very refreshing.
Alienated.
Yeah, to be able to talk about all the horror and sci-fi movies we love. It was there at the European Genre Forum. It was 3 days of talking about horror films, sci-fi films, non-stop, just in Europe. So that was just amazing.
It sounds ideal. Yeah, it sounds ideal. So. Okay, so you've got Stowe coming up in June, then you've got more European Genre Forum happening in July, and then later on in the year as well. What happens after that? What's your next steps?
Okay, so really we are hoping to attach the co-producer, an Irish co-producer. So over the next few months, that would be great to get the ball rolling. And we'd like to attach a sales agent as well. But finding a partner in Ireland would be a big step for us, because then we can start financing the movie and hopefully make it in Ireland.
Well, we've
right.
got,
so Irish producers, listen up. This is your opportunity now to get involved. Right?
To make the werewolf movie of the decade.
Yes. And we've got at least 25% of a £1 million budget currently, and that's the floor for me with what I want to do, the time I want to shoot it, the amount of time I need to shoot, and the production design and so on in mind, and the creature effects. I would say it's £1 million to £2 million film, and there's a big gap between $1 million and $2 million, but that gap is whatever level of cast you're aiming for, I would say. So, the floor is doing it in the way I want to do it with a certain level of cast. And if it was 2 million, it would be the next level of cast. So it's somewhere between $1 million and 2. We already, if it's $1 million, we already have 25% in private equity already in place. And that's, that's a genuine offer. So we're looking to leverage that really, and obviously tax credits make a huge difference if we're looking for, and the other thing, I've said this before, to me, what an elevated genre film is where the director and the team behind it, the producer and the creative team, don't settle for any aspect of making the movie, the script especially, but the cast, the production design, the cinematography, the props, everything has to be done really well, and that's ultimately how you'll end up with an elevated genre film. And the same goes for who your sales agent is. Is it a sales agent that really cares about film and filmmakers versus in the genre field, a lot of them tend to be, they don't care too much about, they care about horror and thriller and sci-fi and whatever, but they're not, don't necessarily care about the quality of the filmmaking. I know that's a sort of criticism, but there are a lot of sales agents in the genre field that are distributing very low budget and sometimes and oftentimes poorly made genre films, and trying to also separate ourselves from that, so that the how people regard the film is also important as well. And I'm being snobbish now in that respect, but it's really important that whoever the sales agent are, the distributors, that they can market. The perfect example would be someone like A24. So they make The Witch, produce The Witch. It follow, the Lighthouse, and so we're aiming to have the film, to partner with someone that know how to market and sell elevated genre films.
Well, look, you're allowed to be snobbish about your own work, I think, but like it's but like you're right. You obviously care about your work so much. You've written a great script that's won you a fellowship and got you into forums and labs and stuff like that all over the place, and it's clear that you care about your work so much. It would be a shame not to work with somebody else who cares so deeply about the same work and who understands its potential. And I think that's the dream, isn't it? To have a team across the board that just makes things happen based on their belief in a project, rather than just how many pounds they can get back from, or how many euros they can get back from it.
You put it a lot better than I did, but yeah, exactly.
Well, look at folks, it's like I say, it's an amazing story, it's an amazing script, it's gonna go really far, I think. Best of luck at Stowe Story Labs and beyond. Will you just keep us informed about your adventures at Stowe?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
of course. Yeah. Again, I'm really grateful to to be selected. It's a real honour. So, and I'm really excited about being a part of the lab.
Oh, well, it's our pleasure. It's our pleasure to be supporting you at Irish Film London. Sean, Stephanie, it's been really great to chat to you both. Thanks so much, and once again, best of luck. And we'll hear more from you soon, I'm sure.
Yes, we will. Okay, thank you, Gerry. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerry.
Thanks, guys.
I hope you enjoyed the chat today, and keep an eye out for information about The Last Moon's development. Sean is going to keep us up to date with the film's process. Before I let you go, I just want to remind you all that we have a brand new film programme coming for May, and this one is focused purely on documentaries, including some feature lengths in there as well, not just shorts. They will be available soon for you to purchase. And also, any filmmakers listening, remember to submit your shorts to Film Freeway for any of our festivals or monthly film programmes. Don't forget to follow us on social media. Simply search for Irish Film London on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. A final thank you to the Irish Emigrant Support Programme and Culture Ireland, who've been brilliant supporters of ours for years. Gura Mila Mahaguth. The Irish Film London podcast is presented and produced by me, Niamh Brannigan. Our interviewer today was Gerry Maguire, who is also the head of Irish Film London. We're edited by Owen Bill Cliff, and our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod. Thanks again for listening, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.